let's get in now to our first guest with money and financial well-being, often a source of shame for people with ADHD. It's rarely, however, talked about openly, even though people with ADHD are more likely to experience debt and have trouble managing their money.
Joining us now is Tina Mathams, who is known as the ADHD Accountant. She's written a finance book called ADHD Money. Welcome to AusBiz. A pleasure to have you here with us, Tina. This is something, to be totally honest, that I have never turned my mind to before. Is that a reaction that you get quite a bit?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me. Absolutely. To be honest, I didn't even know that it was something that people would want to talk about. I started posting online about my own ADHD journey and diagnosis, and then I started having people ask me about money, and I thought, surely people don't want to talk about money with ADHD. But let me assure you, it's been very successful, and people want to talk about it, they want to learn about it, and it's so heartwarming to see that even for a community that really does struggle with money and impulsive spending and debt problems, as you said, are so willing to learn different ways of managing their finances.
So Tina, tell us a little bit about how neurodivergent people can, as you say, potentially impulse spend, maybe not be so great with their finances, and we don't want to generalize here, but just tell us what you found.
Yeah, so when I talk to people in the community, especially at first, when I first started delving into this, a lot of impulsive spending, getting into debt really easily, struggling to pay off that debt, struggling with savings as well. Sometimes people would save a little bit of money, then dip straight back into it. But with ADHD, we have an interest-based nervous system compared to what's typically in a neurotypical nervous system and brain. They have a consequence-based nervous system. So for us, we struggle with anything that we don't find of genuine interest. Often consequences won't work. So, for example, with our money, if we, and again, this is a bit of a, generalization. Not everyone's going to experience this. But, if we have a consequence of not having enough money to pay our bill in 2 weeks away, it doesn't really mean much to us, because if it's not due now, it means it's due later on, and we don't often think about it. So we'll often spend our money and not have enough money for that bill down the track. So it can be really, really challenging, and often, typical financial advice and tips generally don't work for us.
So how do you overcome then, Tina, some of those challenges that face some neurodivergent people, struggling with their money?
Yeah, so lots and lots of different ways. For example, some things that I have found that have worked for myself and people that I've worked with, and some of the things that are in my book. A 24-hour rule before purchasing something. That is often talked about in other areas of money, not just with ADHD, but I find that can be really, really helpful. And also trying to find ways where we can integrate our finances in a way that's really interesting for us. So, for example, I worked with a client a little while ago who, when she would need to track her money, she would go to her favorite coffee shop and get her favorite coffee and something to, eat while she did something like that. So it's just trying to integrate ways to just make it interesting. When we're saving, what can we save for that really means something to us, rather than just saving for a rainy day, because that's the kind of stuff that we can find really hard. If there's not an interest behind it, if there's not some sort of meaning behind it, sometimes we can struggle to save that. So it's trying to find ways that we can have a little bit of fun with our money, rather than just finding it really boring, because that's when it's going to be really hard to work on it.
Tina, what's in your book? The book's called ADHD Money. What are some of the, ways that people can get sort of tips from you?
Yeah, so there's so much different stuff in there. I talk about spending, I talk about ways to budget, ways to save, but I also talk about ways to, what's sort of more in our mindset. I do talk a lot about that, because I do have a genuine belief that not only do we need to manage the numbers side of our money, but also the mindset side and the energy side, and knowing, how we grew up around money, that can all affect our finances, not just our ADHD. So there's lots of tips in there. It's kind of a workbook, so it's not something that you just read and put down. You can actually read, do the exercises, so you're integrating it while you're learning as well.
So when you are, we're, as a nation, not very financially literate, ADHD or no ADHD, correct?
Yes.
So is this something
Yep.
that you can look at as a younger person? I mean, we do want to sort of start this kind of education and this conversation earlier, I think, than we do, generally speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are right. The financial literacy is an issue across the board. But yeah, absolutely. I strategically made my book for easy to read, and especially for an ADHD brain, where you can just pick it up and just read a section of it. You don't have to go from, front cover to back cover. And certainly, the younger generation, they'll be able to read it as well. So it's not, it doesn't really go into a lot of depth with, crazy finance words or, investing and all these different terms that people may not know. It is really something that's easy to follow, easy to read. So it's good for the younger generation, it's good for older generation. It's great even if, people don't know if they've got ADHD. Maybe they just need something a little bit different, even if they don't have ADHD, something that they can, follow along with, do some exercises, and get some fun finance integration into their life.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, because some of the traits, typical traits of those with ADHD who find themselves struggling with money, perhaps also, is felt in the broader sort of neurotypical population as well. So do you have another book up your sleeve, Tina?
I don't as yet. Maybe one day if I've got some more content. Certainly, as the time goes on, I do sort of have the cogs spinning in my head about what else I could put into a finance book. So maybe down the track there'll be something.
Maybe give her a minute. She just wrote this one too. But Tina, you're also really big on social media, and we know that's where a lot of people, particularly younger people, are getting their advice or they're leaning into. So just tell us, I guess, what you do on, I believe, Instagram and TikTok as well to sort of help people.
Yep. So I just do, videos and, just sort of those static posts and things like that, just with some really, it could just be really quick tips. It could be a little bit more in depth. I do talk a little bit about my journey as well, and I certainly do in my book too, because one thing that I always try to let people know is that I'm not someone who's just written a book because I know some stuff. Like I've been there, I've done all the stuff in the book, I have done the impulsive spending. I'm someone who's really lived it, so I try to convey that in my tips and videos and things on social media as well.